Chair, I make that 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Chris. Well, good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is open to the press and the public. The meeting is being broadcast live, and a recording of this meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting is concluded. Please be aware that this meeting is being transcribed only for the purpose of producing the minutes. This transcript will be deleted once the committee approves the minutes. The transcript should not be downloaded by anyone other than Democratic Services. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings, but I've had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. May I remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you all please use your cameras for the duration of the meeting. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. Please do not interrupt discussions until you have been notified of your intention to speak and you have been invited to do so. Moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, welcome and apologies. Chris, do we have any apologies today?
We do, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor John James, Councillor Lucy Williams and the Executive Member, Councillor Richard Clark.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Members, do anybody have any declarations with regards to the item we are scrutinising today?
The members on the corporate parenting panel.
Okay. Councillor Watkins?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I need to declare it, but I'm on the foster panel.
Okay.
Foster panel as well. I'm on the corporate parenting panel.
Yes, I'm on the corporate parenting panel as well. So, okay. Agenda item 3, minutes of our meeting on the 5th of February 2026. Members, could you please state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as agreed. No. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, action sheet. Rebecca, could you please run us through the action sheet?
Thank you, Chair. So there are 2 actions listed there on the action sheet. The first one was the responses to the recommendations that you made at the last committee meeting, which you have all received. And then the second action there is arising from the last meeting as well, and that's with the timeline for the Torfaen-specific dashboard. So that is ongoing, and we will let you know as soon as we have any further information on that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 is our substantive issue, is the report for Children Looked After strategy. Before we commence discussions, I would like to welcome Mr Jason O'Brien, Jacqueline Richards, Claire Warlock, Kirsty Cook and Emily Fenn. Did I capture everybody? Yeah, good. Members have all read the report, and so we'll head straight into questions unless anyone would like to make any introductory comments beforehand. No? Okay. Right, well, our first question is Councillor Rose Seaborn, please.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is relating to 3.5 in the report. And Torfaen continues to have one of the highest rates of children looked after in Wales, currently second highest, but remains committed to further reducing this rate in line with the Welsh average. Whilst it's great to be being further committed to reducing the rate, are there democratic factors, like, for example, deprivation, etc., that may have more of an impact than in other areas? I mean, there's a lot of deprivation and poverty in certain parts of the borough, and this is my question, is that do we have that factor to factor in rather than becoming top of the average?
Yeah, absolutely. There are factors such as poverty that are perhaps more prevalent within Torfaen than other areas in Wales. However, what I would say is that there are other areas in Wales that have higher levels of deprivation that have lower children looked after population. So I think those are all the things that we've taken into consideration. And I suppose one of the local authorities that I would cite within that is Neath Talbot, for example, who've had historically a very high rate of children looked after, who've managed to reduce their children looked after population quite significantly and are now kind of in the bottom few local authorities in Wales.
It was a question we posed ourselves when we went through the process of reviewing the children's services structure, almost what makes us different, because we've had that high level, or we've had that high level of looked after children. So the question posed was what makes us different. And when we sort of looked at some of those demographics, as Jacqueline said, there were some areas where there were the differences, but you could also argue within other local authority areas there were other components of the demographic that were more challenging for them. So I think what it lent itself to really was around our structures and some areas of practice really as well. So that's the key driver, I think, that led to that reduction. But there are similarities, there are differences across each local authority area. I think we can compare ourselves quite easily to Blaenau Gwent, for example, Neath Talbot, Bridgend. We probably couldn't compare ourselves to Monmouthshire or Powys or Cardiff, the bigger areas. So there are key areas, but what's been crucial for us was that question of why are we out there constantly, which led itself to change in practice.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you. Moving on to paragraph 4.1, it states here that during the earlier phase of delivery, the Accelerated Improvement Group was used to provide focused governance, challenge and oversight to support pace, consistency and assurance. Who was made up of who were in the AIG, and have we stepped away from the AIG now? And are we confident, if we have, that the processes are sufficiently embedded?
Yeah, so the AIG consisted of myself, Chief Executive, Jacqueline, the Group Managers, lead from Finance, Performance, and by, I guess, individually invite key areas where we saw, or key services or key individuals where we saw that there could be an impact. So we had digital would come along there, somebody from SRS, for example, by invite. We'd link in with the Early Intervention and Prevention Hub as well, so to make sure we had that, I guess, holistic approach to challenging the position we were in. In terms of the AIG, I guess, no longer existing, we did that accelerated piece of work. So I guess, as the title suggests, Accelerated Improvement Group, we did that accelerated piece of work and then step back from that for this to become more of there's still eyes on this, still peering eyes on this, but make it more of a business as usual process so that it became consistent throughout everybody's practice, rather than almost waiting for an AIG to direct what you needed to do next. So we set the standard day with AIG, stepped back away from it and embedded that sort of process within day-to-day practice. What we did within the AIG then, though, was some financial modelling, some key financial modelling, and some modelling around, I guess, what we call now a tracker, which is tracking all our children looked after and tracking the planning processes for them. So we've got that every member who was part of AIG can access and view the processes there. So even though we've stepped away from, I guess, a formal meeting, those processes still exist, so we've got that continued oversight.
I monitor the tracker on a monthly basis, so there's still that regular, I would say at least a monthly basis, formally on a monthly basis, to ensure that the deadlines that we're setting, we're actually moving at pace. It prevents that drift, but it ensures that we've got oversight of care plans for all of our children. We know where we're heading and in what timescales. And
as Claire probably feels, I monitor on an almost daily basis and go, what's happening in this case?
So that was sort of going to be my supplementary. So if you're not the only person that is monitoring it, is there a standard set so everyone's expected to do it monthly or in a certain way, or does it depend on departments?
So initially I took responsibility for updating the tracker. I've now moved that to the team managers. So they're now responsible for their caseloads within the team. I expect them to update those in line with the expectations that have been set out along care plans, and to give rationale where there's perhaps delay or where we're moving faster perhaps than what we'd originally proposed. But then I also meet with them monthly to have those senior management conversations with them, you know, if there's any questions to be asked, etc. So it is about embedding it down within their culture and within their practice, rather than it being because a manager's checking up on me. We're doing it as business as usual. This is what we need to be doing.
Sorry, just to add that the other element that we've introduced in relation to the tracking of residential placements is a new residential placement meeting, so chaired by myself. Group managers are also present, and all the team managers who have children who are placed in residential care, and that's obviously as a result of those residential placements being the most high cost, and ensuring that we have step-down plans in place and that there isn't any drift in terms of the step-down plans for those in residential care.
Councillor Janet Jones.
Thanks, Chair. And my question is in relation to paragraph 4.2. Progress against this trajectory is monitored routinely and is now embedded within business-as-usual performance management and government arrangements. How will we forecast the trajectory? Does the nature of children's services make it difficult to do so?
Yes is the answer to the last question, because we're never not going to respond to safeguarding concerns. And if, by way of an example, the report references 297 children looked after, as of today we're 302. So we've peaked a little since that time. You know, we continue to have that focus on reduction, but that's the nature of the beast, and we're seeing children coming into the looked after system on an emergency basis. It is a challenge, but we've got greater control of that as well, I would say, now than we had previously. And the first part of the question was around how we planned the trajectory, was it, Councillor? So what we did there in terms of that trajectory was looked at all the different cohorts of children looked after we have, or look at the overall number of children we looked after we had, and compared that against then the next best performer within Wales, or the next worst performer, whichever way you look at it within Wales, the Welsh national average, the best performer within Wales in terms of numbers of children looked after per 100,000 population. And we gauged ourselves and pitched ourselves against those. And again, asked ourselves the question of how do we and why can't we achieve the same or figures in line with those local authorities. So within that, that enabled us to match out our different cohorts and compare those to other local authority areas as well. So there was some science, really, or some formula behind what we were trying to do in terms of our reduction, rather than just sticking our finger in the air and going, next year we'll achieve a reduction by X amount. So we've set ourselves within our planning process as a 3-year target figure, year on year. So this year's end of target was 296. Which we have achieved, and then we've risen back up slightly, but confident we've achieved that by the end of the year again. And then I think next year's target is less than 200 or 261, and then I think we need to get to 230 or thereabouts to come in line with the Welsh national average.
Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you. Moving on to paragraph 4.6, which looks at the safe reduction of the children looked after population. How can we ensure safe reduction of the children looked after population is priority versus a drive to just reduce the numbers?
So the numbers are children. I think that we often focus on numbers, but each of these numbers are individual children with individual care plans. And our focus is to ensure that these children have the correct care plans. So we're as safe for them to be at home, and we're as safe for them to be without that statutory intervention, and to have social workers visiting regularly. That's what we're aiming to achieve. So whilst it might look very focused on numbers, our actual focus is ensuring that these children are safe and we're able to live within their family homes and have as normal a life as possible while being able to reach their full potential. So there are other factors around numbers in respect of, the costs, etc., that we have to focus on. But I'm confident in saying in this local authority, our main priority is our children and providing them with the best and safest opportunities that we can.
Sorry, the other thing just to add that I think we've had a real focus on in terms of decision making at the front door then when we're getting referrals and there's the potential for children to come into care, is to really ensure that we're considering the balance of harm at that point in terms of whilst there may be risks identified in relation to a particular child or young person, we need to ensure that we're not creating alternative risks by bringing that child into care. So it's about really considering at that point whether we can put in place support and intervention to that family to reduce those risks to an acceptable level, because what we know is that actually we are causing harm by removing children and bringing them into care, and the outcomes aren't always positive in that regard. So it's having that real focus on balance of harm decision making at that front door.
Thank you for that. It's kind of Hobson's choice, isn't it, really? You know, rather you than me. Councillor Collette-Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question refers to paragraph 4.6. How will we be able to measure the impact of early intervention is actually having in reducing CLA numbers? What evidence do we have to show this is effective?
I think in terms of, let me read that again. In terms of measuring the impact, I think what we do is we analyse our looked after, our reduction of looked after is analysed both in terms of what's coming in and what's going out. So those children that are entering the system and those children that are exiting the system. What's important that we do, though, is that we don't just look at it from a looked after children point of view. We look at this from a wholesale point of view of any child that's entering our children's services system. So that's something we do, that's something we evaluate and monitor. So in terms of just our looked after children population, we break down those that leave each month and those that we've prevented from coming in each month, or those that we're working with at different parts of the system each month. So we're analysing that. In terms of, I guess, what the question lends itself to, I guess, is part of the effectiveness of the EIP hub as well, and that preventative model we've got within the early intervention and prevention hub. So, I mean, what I would say in a very broad sense is we are seeing the impact of that, because that will be one of the things that's contributing to our numbers coming down as well, because not only are children leaving the system, but we're preventing children from coming into the system as well. I mean, what we could do, perhaps I don't want to set colleagues up here, but what we could do further down the line is look at this time last year, or this time 3 years ago, how many children we had coming into the system, and now how many children we've got coming into the system. I would suggest they'd be, you know, they will be less, but that's something we could certainly do.
I think the other thing that we've done in terms of trying to increase the earlier intervention is the restructure of children's services. So we have introduced a care and support team. So whereas previously we were working on a locality basis, and it was inevitable to a certain extent that those cases that were on the children on the Child Protection Register and in court proceedings would take up the vast majority of a social worker's time, and perhaps less focus on those kind of lower end, at the lower end of the spectrum where there were care and support needs. The restructure has enabled us to create a dedicated team to work with those children and families at the lower end, with a view to hopefully avoiding that escalation through the system.
Okay. Councillor Seaborn, please.
Thanks. You've answered my question to a certain extent, but my question is on the same subject. Have we been able to hasten the pace of implementing exit strategies for those children who have come into our care but are safe and ready to be moved on?
Yes. I think what we've seen through the tracking process is that we've reduced drift. So we're able to evidence a great level of accountability for moving cases forward. A couple of years ago, in conjunction with the local courts, we piloted an accelerated discharge process as well with the courts, so that we were that part of the system of exit we were able to influence and able to speed up. Because I guess there's a couple of parts within the system that enable that process of exit in the looked after system. There's the work that we're doing. There's the work our social workers are doing, there's the work our legal services within Torfaen are doing, and then there's the work that the court are doing. And a lot of that is built up on capacity, and what we see sometimes is at different points within that system, capacity is reduced. So it may very well be, that there's a lot going on in court, or there's a big court list, so the court aren't able to deal with an issue or with a discharge application for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. There may be issues within our legal capacity, there may be issues within our social care capacity, but what we're able to do now within that tracking process is determine exactly where the blockages are and put that additional, perhaps, pressure on, or that additional resource in to enable that.
As a supplementary, I remember dealing with blockages within the court system, and it's quite an expensive issue. And does that affect what we're trying to do with this strategy? Is there a partnership there in the court, or is there a process that needs to go through that, whatever time it takes, it needs to be done?
I mean, there's a process we need to go through, because it's a process that the court will want to test as well. It's not just as simple and straightforward as going, we're now ready for this order to discharge. The court, CAFCAS, they will want to test that. They will want to test our assessment as well. So there is a process that we have to go through that does take time, and probably rightly so that it takes time as well, rather than just let's exit this child. Let's make sure we as a system, we need to make sure that we're making the right decision for this child and family.
I just wondered if the blockages were still happening and causing us financial.
The approximate timeframe is currently from filing a discharge application with the court is between 10 and 12 weeks. So it's not a huge delay. That's when we're moving through accelerated discharge. Sometimes, obviously, we have a number of different hearings that can then extend it further. Going back to the original question about hastening the pace, I think the restructure is definitely playing an active role in this. So we now have a dedicated team, long-term planning and reunification team. It is what it says in the tin. We're working actively to reunify children with their parents, with next step being discharge of care orders. And because we have that specific focus, and you'll see in the report there's specific funding for 2 officers, currently FIWs, to work with families to support that to happen, I think that we're seeing that the start of that process. Within the report, you'll see how many children we've returned home over a period. Those children we should, ideally, be moving towards discharge in short periods of time. We don't put specific time frames because every child and every family is different, but we work on, or we try to work to sort of a 12-month period to evidence that risks have reduced and that those risks and the level of care is sustained, because we don't want to step away too quickly or discharge too quickly, because you end up in that sort of cycle. So we have to do this in a timely way and ensure that the correct levels of support are in place.
Thank you. Councillor Janet Jones, please.
Thanks, Chair. My next question is in relation to paragraph 4.7. The actions and priorities previously overseen through AIG have now been incorporated into core departmental governance and performance management arrangements, reflecting a transition to business as usual delivery. How embedded is this?
I think we've probably answered most of that in previous questions, but we have the regular child looked after tracker, as we discussed, and we've seen a complete change in culture, I would say, within the local authority in respect of expectations around care plan progression. We now have a dedicated independent reviewing officer who focuses on children who are at home with care orders to ensure that we have consistent approach and progression. So there's lots of things that we've introduced to ensure that it's the way we do things around here rather than it's just a service management oversight. Definitely, we always want more, we always strive for more, but I think that we're doing it in a safe way, and we're doing, the discharges and the reductions that we're seeing. We're very happy with that, and we just want to maintain that progress now.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Watkins, please.
Thank you. Moving on to the graph at 4.10, a significant proportion of those leaving children's services care are those who've turned 18. How are we ensuring transition programmes are in place for those who still require support?
Are you referring to care leavers over 18s, yes? Yeah. Okay, so every young person who's a child looked after who reaches 18 will be supported with a YPA, so a young person's advisor. The level of support is slightly different because the approach at that point then will be on progression to independence. For those young people with additional needs, we also work sort of a transition process, and we work closely with adult services. So some of those young people will be allocated social workers from adult services. And in Torfaen, we do things a little bit differently in that whilst our over 18s, there isn't a statutory requirement for us to have social workers allocated. For those young people who have some additional needs, but not needs that would meet the threshold for adult services, in some situations we'll extend the social work support to ensure that they have continuity of support with a very clear plan of step out. We don't want to develop a dependence because it's time limited. We're not able to offer over 18s long-term social work support, but we look at each child individually and we manage their care plans in that way. You'll see that I talked about ESS, our ESS provision and our supported accommodation. So a lot of our young people won't be ready to move in on their own at 18, and so they'll be supported through supported accommodation. We also have our When I'm Ready scheme. We have supported lodgings provisions. So lots of other support services for those young people when they hit that 18. Because a lot of our young people are not ready at 18 just to move into independence, like our own kids wouldn't be. But as a result of their own experiences, they might need that extra level of support.
I was just going to add some further context, in relation to When I'm Ready, just in case members aren't fully aware of that. So When I'm Ready is a scheme available for if young people are in foster care at the point that they turn 18, then if they agree and the foster carer agrees, they can continue to remain in that foster placement post-18. Again, acknowledging the fact that most young people now who turn 18 don't immediately move out of their parents' home. So it provides them with that couple of years to develop their independence skills so that they're actually ready for independence at the end of that.
One of the things that also lends itself to that transition process is within the service redesign, our 16 plus team became our 15 plus team. So in many ways it gives another year of planning and consistency within one team for those children that then become adults and need that service from adult social care.
Okay. Councillor Thomas, please.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the supported living scheme? And have we got enough placements? Is it sufficient at the moment? Also looking at the budget, that is quite a high spend. So could you give us some more information about the supported housing schemes? Have we got enough to meet demand? And I'm just looking at the budget figures. It's quite a high spend on our budget. So I just wondered, what services are we providing?
Our ESS provision is a provision that is commissioned to Clymai. So Clymai provides staffing and oversee the provision for us. It consists of a 4-bed accommodation and a 3-bed accommodation, and then we also have 4 self-contained flats or properties, 1-bed properties. So the placements are determined by need. So Clymai will undertake assessments of young people prior to move-in to ensure that their needs, any risks matching with other young people that they're going to be placed alongside prior to move-in. And then we move them through the system, if you like. So the one home is a lower level with lower levels of support. Wern Road then is higher levels of support with staffing available 24/7, and then we move on to the independence flats where there can be daily support if necessary, but it would generally be those young people who are almost ready to step out on their own. It's a bit of a tester with that little wraparound to help them with that. We have monthly meetings, housing planning meetings, to ensure that we are managing the move through. Sometimes we'll have voids Very rarely we have voids because we're now managing that very carefully. So we see young people that we're needing to step down and we're planning their transition into the supported accommodation and then onwards. So again, we do the same sort of thing in respect of a tracker. So we're moving and we're looking at care plan progression, etc. We do also commission out to other providers. So there's another provider within our locality, Graig Farm. We have a number of young people who are placed in Graig Farm, which is a similar supported accommodation. And then we have some young people who may have been placed in foster placements outside of Torfaen, and their wish is that they remain in those areas because that's where they've developed support networks and peer groups, and we can access supported accommodation then in those localities as necessary. So we're not entirely dependent on our own in-house provision. We can commission in other local authorities as well. Does that answer your question?
Do we have enough accommodation then to meet the demand or future planning? If we...
Yes, currently we do, but we're managing that, and we've got a tracker which basically gives us ideas of what we're going to need in the future so we can plan effectively. But currently we're meeting needs. We had previously proposed that we would have more flats, more one-bedroom flats, but actually we've determined that we don't need that amount, that actually 4 to 5 flats is more than sufficient for our cohort of young people, and so we've reduced that in line with. So it's sort of a it's a moving plan in line with need.
And it's something we've recently reviewed and are continuing to review with our ESS provision and how it works out in terms of the numbers of young people who need that resource and the value for money from it as well.
I'm just going to add quickly, I think it's really important that we get the right balance in terms of the amount of supported accommodation that we have in-house, because we could increase it, but we equally don't want to be in a position where we're paying for voids as well. So I think the way that it's managed at the moment works effectively.
Thank you. My question now, given that a significant proportion leaving care are due to them turning 18, how confident can we be that the mechanisms implemented are having an impact on other cohorts of children within our system? It's referring to the graph on at 410.
I think the straightforward answer for me there, again, comes back to our tracking tool and our ability to be able to... So we will know that a number of children will naturally leave our care system by virtue of turning 18, as that graph suggests. But what we're also able to evidence through the tracking mechanism and within that graph is the numbers that leave via other means and other mechanisms. So those that leave through order discharge, those that maybe Section 76, so involuntary, they're looked after on a voluntary basis and return home so that we don't have to discharge an order. That's another child that becomes unlooked after. That's the child that exits our looked after system. So even though our 18-year-olds will naturally move out, we track then the remaining cohort. And does that answer the question, Councillor?
Yeah. Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you. Still looking at the graph at 4.10, one of the biggest areas on there is the purple area, which is labelled Other. I wonder if you could give us some examples of what actually Other covers.
I think Jason just touched on it there. So when a young person becomes a looked after child, they don't necessarily become looked after through a court order. It could be through a voluntary arrangement. We call it Section 76 of Social Services and Wellbeing Act. We don't need to discharge that care order then. So when you see care order discharges, that's for children who are subject of care orders. The young people have exactly the same support, the same system, the same statutory responsibilities in respect of visiting, etc. But when they're returned home to parents, they're no longer looked after. They're not subject of care orders, and so the reduction would fall there.
So just to clarify, so that would be all those classed as Other would be under that, the voluntary care orders?
The only other thing that I would question that I'll need to check for you is sometimes we have children who are subject of interim care orders. So it is almost a temporary care order while we're before the courts. Sometimes we come out of court without a need for a full care order. So I wonder if that's classed within that other section also, because we wouldn't need to discharge that order. That would just lapse in the courts. So I'm making the assumption that that would fall within that other also, but I can confirm that for you with our data team.
We'll also have children within that defines, I guess, other who, for example, may have been subject to police powers of protection over a weekend period. So they may come in and be looked after on a Friday. Circumstances may very well have changed, and by the Monday, because we're back to full service by the Monday, then we may have returned those children back home. So there's a number. So there's your voluntary looked after children, your police powers of protection would fall into that as well.
Councillor Thomas, did you have a question now? I think Councillor Thomas said that you wanted to fit one in. Do you want to see it now?
What progress has been made with our foster care recruitment, especially for children, older children?
I'm sure many of you will have seen the Teens campaign that we're currently running and all the lovely assets that we've been able to put out in respect to the Teen campaign. And we have seen some progress. We've seen some increased inquiries from prospective foster carers, and we've also seen a number of Form Fs progressing and coming to fostering panel. So we are making progress. We want to continue that progress and increase those numbers still, but we are making good progress, I would suggest.
The report did say about foster care for older children as well.
Yes.
So are we being successful in that?
With our Teens campaign, yes, we are. I think probably slower progress, but we are still getting there, and we are seeing increased inquiries in that regard also.
Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you. Moving on to paragraph 4.12, it states there, supported by dedicated independent reviewing officer oversight and 2 family intervention workers with a specific remit to progress plan of discharge funded through Welsh Government Eliminating Profit and Radical Reform grant funding. So these 2 workers have been key in driving the numbers down. So how long is the funding available for, and will these posts continue if the grant is no longer available?
The funding is for 3 years through the Eliminating Profit and Radical Reform grant. So that's really welcome, because I think previously we've had the funding kind of agreed only on a year-by-year basis. And in terms of whether we will continue with those individual posts when we no longer have the grant funding available, obviously the whole premise of this is that we are reducing the number of children who are in the looked after system, so we would have to kind of evaluate whether there's a continued need for those posts at the point in time that the funding ceases. Obviously, if there is a need, then we would look to see whether we could continue to fund that either through court or through other grant funding. But the hope would be that we would actually see the numbers come down, so there would no longer be that need for those workers.
Can I add to that in saying that within the report you'll see the significant reduction in children looked after numbers over the last 6 years. We've actually increased our staffing population, I think, haven't we? We've actually got more staff now than we did back at that time, and we're looking after a heck of a lot less children, which means that our capacity within teams is higher. It enables us to do better quality, more intensive work. So that's something else that we'll also need to consider, obviously, in respect of the necessity of additional staffing. We've got those 2 dedicated workers, but their work spans across the team. So we have I think we have another 2 FIWs in long-term team. They also play a part in these reunification plans. Sorry, 3. We have 3, not 4. Just been corrected. Yes, so the work is ongoing, and whilst they are specific for the whole service is working towards it. So we've got social workers doing that reunification work, CSWs, FIWs. So it's great to have those additional, but it is part of the overall job as well.
Thank you for that. Something just sort of came across my mind now. Have we looked into the sort of staffing levels in other authorities? You know, is it a question of we weren't resourcing sort of children's care? Were the high numbers due to the fact that we didn't have a good enough resource?
In the word, I would say no. I think it was down to practice, and it was down to, I think, I guess as the report lends itself to that wholesale review of our practice, our structures. So I don't think it was necessarily around resource that meant we were bringing more children in. I think it was down to practice and down to control of that practice.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Janet Jones, please.
Can I just add to that in respect of we do believe that it was down to practice, but as I said earlier, the fact that we now have less children to care for and we have more time, we should see an increase. So, it will have that positive effect now that we have more staff, but I don't think it was the reason previously.
Social workload was an issue as well, wasn't it?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Paragraph 4.14. Sustained multi-agency support with an emphasis on avoiding drift and ensuring that return home plans are realistic, supported and regularly reviewed. Are we collectively reviewing reunification to ensure any issues or potential difficulties are identified and learned from further reunification cases?
Yes, is the answer to that. I think we can always learn, and something that, a care plan that looks perfect on paper may not always work out in the way that you expect it to. And as social workers, we learn from that, and we put that learning into practice with the next family that we work with. We've mentioned our strengths-based practice here. Some of the strengths-based practice process is about peer reflection and peer group, group supervisions. So we ensure that all of our staff engage in our learning. So it's not individual social workers that are learning from perhaps something that hasn't worked out as we expected. The whole group and sometimes the whole service then, where there are learning needs, we'll incorporate that into training or service development.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. Moving on to paragraph 4.21, placements. It states there, in some cases, children are placed in residential provision, not because this is the most appropriate long-term option, but due to limited availability of experienced and skilled foster carers, particularly for older children and those with complex emotional or behavioural needs. Are we seeing much movement in terms of improving the number of placements for children with complex needs?
I think this is always going to be something that we can improve at, and I think there's lots of kind of layers to that as well. It's about us having the right foster carers who want to help support and work with children. There's also a need for a really good programme of skilling up foster carers, really good training package around our foster carers. And I think all of these remain subject to continual kind of review and improvement. And obviously part of that is making sure that we're working closely with our foster carers and we know what they need, but also that we know what our children and young people need and if there are any kind of trends. So I think there's lots of layers to that question, but I think we continue to make steps to improve, and that'll be continued ongoing, I guess. I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but those are my immediate thoughts.
Yeah, I think it sort of does, because it sort of explains the challenge of finding the right foster carers and the training. So do we feel that the two numbers are lining up, so the number of complex needs is more or less equal to the number of foster carers being able to provide places for them?
I think not yet, and I think we're still in a position where we have children who are being placed into residential provision because we don't have foster carers that are able to meet the children's needs. But I think linking up with the tracker again, we're very closely tracking, and we're always looking to step down children and young people out of residential care and into suitable foster placements. At the moment, that could be an IFA foster placement. However, obviously, we know the complexities around that moving forward. So I think all I can say is it's kind of ongoing, and it's something that we're really keeping a close eye on.
In terms of our residential cohort, we've seen a reduction there in our residential cohort, which I guess you could, one could suggest that's where our children with more complex needs or more complex situations are residing. We've seen a reduction from a high of 25, we're at 18 at the moment. So sitting outside of the foster care arrangement as well, what members will also be aware of is our development of our own in-house residential provision. Which what we've seen within Greenhill Bungalow, we've seen that effectively move children on as well, because we've got that greater control. And I think sometimes what we've tended to find, I think I've said this before, is we have children who are stuck within a private residential arrangement who don't necessarily have complex needs, and it would be easy to move on, but sometimes there's a want or a desire to hold on to them within that residential position because of the private arrangements that exist there. Now, what we're able to do, obviously, within our own control and our own residential provision is really drive the plans forward for those children and really move them on, which we're seeing as being effective within that one provision we've got, and hopefully the build-up of the provision, the residential provision we'll have.
Just to add, sorry, within the placement team, we've also got kind of a lead on residential placements now. So we've got a nominated social worker who really gets to know the children and young people and their stories and their needs, often discusses needs with foster carers that are coming through the door, who might be a potential match for those children and young people. So we're really actively working there at our step downs.
Councillor Seymour, please.
Thank you, Chair. Question 14 relates to 4.30. The reduction is not fully reflected in placement costs, as the residential cohort is reduced only marginally, and it continues to account for a significant proportion of overall expenditure. My question is, should there be a level of acceptance that a reduction in the costs for residential placements is unlikely to reduce significantly until the eliminated gender is fully operational, due to the demand for a specific level of care?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think what we're seeing with the eliminated gender as it stands at the moment is a shifting of the market, where I guess, for want of a better description, there's more profiteering at the moment, but in that build-up to 2030, when there's going to be that greater level of control. So I think there'll always be a component of residential where costs will be high. We know that residential costs, our own in-house residential costs, if you compare them to our own in-house foster placement costs, are high. That's inevitable because of the nature of what they are. But I think in terms of our planning, there has been that recognition of these costs are going to be at the higher level continually. What we need to do is manage the market between now and up to 2030, and then further forward within 2030. So there's a local recognition, there's a national recognition as well. The market's in a bit of an influx at the moment.
I think the other point that is important to add is that as a proportion of our total children looked after population, our residential figures are actually low within Torfaen. So I think there's a real focus on children and young people who are in residential because there's a high cost associated, but I think it's really important for us to remember, I think ours is around about 6%, whereas I think it's up to 12% is the average. So yeah, as a proportion of the whole, we're doing really well in terms of low numbers in residential.
Like on a weekend, if you have an emergency and we haven't got care, then you'd have to go out to somewhere else just for support for that family, wouldn't you? Yeah. I just thought we're always going to meet challenges like that.
Thank you. Councillor Price, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to paragraph 4.31. Workforce development has been a key enabler of the CLA reduction strategy. How well do you engage with your teams, social workers, to seek feedback on these new ways of working to ensure that to ensure that are also having a positive impact on them?
I don't want to say too much in response to this, only because we're coming back next month in relation to the restructure. But we have very recently put out a staff survey in relation to the restructure. The response rate was very high. We've also recently held development sessions, 3 development sessions. Well, we've done 2. We've got a 3rd planned across the whole service, with part of that being about seeking feedback on the restructure, but also service development more widely.
Again, I don't want to steal the thunder perhaps of next month's scrutiny as well, but what we did, which I think was really effective here, was we, as you'd expect, we involved staff right from the start of this journey of restructure and redesign. And that was the first question, as I said, I think at the start of the session, the first question we posed to everybody is what makes us different? And when we worked our way around it, everybody got the position of our structure and our practice. So we had a real good foundation then for staff to be really on board with these changes, and touch wood, I hope that's reflected then in the service and then what we report back in the survey and what we report back next month.
Okay. So you had a good response to the survey, but you haven't had any results yet, is that what you said?
We have got the results of the survey, but I'd rather share that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Okay. I was going to say, well, if you have a high response, that's not necessarily good news. But we'll see. Thank you. Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you. Moving on to paragraph 4.33, it states there that this approach has supported a shift away from deficit-focused decision-making towards practice that recognises family strengths, protective factors and capacity for change, while maintaining clear oversight of risk and safeguarding responsibilities. How have we improved how we listen to the voices of the children and their families compared to how we previously did it?
In terms of the strength-based model and rollout that we've been implementing, I think it's fair to say that we have been embedding this over time, but ultimately it is now becoming our bread and butter and our day-to-day business as usual. It's a clear sort of indicator for us that listening to the child and the family is a massive piece of the work that we undertake, and being able to work with the children and the families, looking at what their strengths are, so as well as just identifying what the risk is and what the support needs are, how they themselves can sort of rectify and manage and support that with our assistance. The focus is clearly on the strengths within that family and the wider family as well. As Jacqueline indicated earlier, really, in terms of that balance of harm is massive, really. So in terms of making those decisions, we really want to ensure that we're listening to that child and that family at that time, in terms of perhaps what alternatives there are, what are the sort of mechanisms within the family of support that could be implemented, as opposed to immediately focusing on the risks and looking at an action of potentially removing that child, for instance, which may increase the risks depending on the family or that child's circumstances, really.
In terms of the child's voice as well, I think we, the service redesign or this structure and the work we've done through AIG, that hasn't been the only thing. Historically, we've always had the child's voice, the family's voice at the centre of our decision making, and members will be aware we've had care experienced young people on corporate parenting board. We have NIAS involvement. We have our independent reviewing officers. We have the whole court arrangement as well, and the CAFCAS arrangement and the guardian arrangement for children and families going through the process. So it always has been, I think, the child's voice has been central to our decision making. I think it's just we've tightened up and really, really captured that within our team structures as it stands at the moment.
Councillor Watkins, you asked me previously in a scrutiny around hearing the voice of the child. And I talked to you at that point about developing the consultation documents and how we were trying to make them more in line with children's interests, and we were looking at IT, and we developed something that was going out for consultation with the children. They didn't like it. They didn't like it. The feedback that came back, it wasn't all negative. There were some positives there. So I've accepted that I'm not the right person to do this, and I've moved across to our youth service, who are more engaged with young people and understanding what works for them. And so the youth service are now, they're developing a new provision for our young people, 11 to 15. 11 to 15, and as part of that, there'll be a consultation in redeveloping our consultation document, talking to young people about what they want and what they need to support them to attend their own meetings or to feed into their meetings. And so we're on that journey, and hopefully we'll have more success for the youth service than my efforts.
There's a strategic component as well. And if we think of where we've had the young people takeover days of the council, where they come in and taken on my role and probably done a much better version of it, and the chief exec roles and stuff like that. We've had care experienced and service experienced young people as part of that process as well. So again, in terms of, it's not just about hearing the child's voice individually, but it's making sure that they got that influence at a strategic level as well, which I think we've been quite good at doing through that Young People's Takeover Day.
Councillor Seymour. Oh, Councillor Watkins, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, they're very interesting responses, but that just goes to show the real power of consultation. Because sometimes I think we assume it's going to tell us what we kind of already know. It clearly didn't. It told you that you didn't know, so then you found other ways and better ways. Especially that age group, is how do you connect with that age group. So no, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Councillor Seaborn.
Thanks. Question 17 is about 4.37 of the report. Partnership working and community-based approaches are integral to delivery of children looked after reduction strategy. And this probably came out of the comment at council as well. Have we found higher numbers of no further action referrals from the police? That has been an issue, and if so, how are we looking to address this?
We continue to have a high rate of referrals that are no further action, specifically in relation to the police. What I would say is that that's not a Torfaen specific issue. So we have a safeguarding hub delivery group meeting where it used to be East and West, but I think it's regional now. All the local authorities in the region are represented on that alongside police and other partner agencies, where this has been a regular topic of conversation. We have done a number of things to try and resolve it, including developing the regional threshold guidance via the safeguarding board. That's been rolled out. But one of the areas of focus at the moment is on the training that police get, because I think there's absolutely a recognition in those meetings that there are referrals coming into us that don't need to come into us. So it's not that we're saying that and the police are disagreeing. There is that recognition there, which I think is really positive. So it's about ensuring that the training that frontline officers are getting really gives them the information that they need to determine and use their professional judgment in terms of what needs to be referred in and what doesn't. So they're working on that, and social care practitioners will be feeding directly into the training that the frontline officers get, which I think should hopefully make a significant difference.
I've also requested to meet with the Regional Chief Inspector as well to address, or to try and address the matter. One of the things I'd like to reference here, on even though it's not relating to the police, it's related to education, is what we have seen since our directorate merge as well, is we've seen a reduction in the numbers of NFA referrals that come in through schools. And I think last looked at, it was something like about 14 or 15%. Were NFA referrals, no further action referrals. And for me, that's a suitable, that's an appropriate amount. We're never going to get zero, and we wouldn't want zero. And some of those referrals that come in, what we need to acknowledge as well, maybe repeat referrals, or maybe a referral to another organisation has made it. But we've really seen that significant reduction within that school setting, which is, you know, really good in terms of, I think, the way that we're working as one system across children's services with education.
Is this a result of having the educational welfare officers within the school?
No, it's a result, I think, of our directorate merge, and where we've done some joint training with schools around thresholds, around expectations, around where services can fall as well. I think there's also an influence the EIP hub will have played here as well, because some of those referrals that won't be safeguarding referrals, but may have a need, will be going in through our EIP hub as well. So I guess saving the front door of our MASH really. So that's been effective.
Thank you.
Councillor Seaborn.
I'm not familiar with the police training situation, but do we include our PCSOs? Because sometimes they're the first responders. Our officers are PCSO. Certainly in my ward, I wouldn't see a police officer unless they were called in, but I have contact with the PCSOs.
Yeah, I'm not sure of who that. Emily's nodding, so I think it's a yes. We wouldn't actually be delivering that or organising that training. It's organised by the police. It's just about us feeding in to ensure that the messages that they're being given are the correct messages.
Yeah, I was just to say my understanding is that it's across the board with right. Police colleagues, so it would be at all levels of individuals having intervention.
We feed up. Yeah.
My question now refers to paragraph 4.40, which says that as part of Torvine's wider prevention and early intervention offer, the Council continues to invest in community-based family support centres that provide timely, targeted support to children and families at an early point. So my question is, how are these centres supporting work to prevent children coming into care?
Thank you. There's various strands of work that is undertaken within the family centres. One of those strands of work is family group conferencing, where we bring families together, immediate and extended family and friends, as and when appropriate, really, to help them, support them to make their own plan in order to address safeguarding needs. That's certainly an element of early intervention that we're really focusing in on and using actively. And I know that some links have been drawn with colleagues in education welfare, and they're really keen to use that service as well. So there's kind of work ongoing there. And obviously those families quite often might not have hit threshold for social services involvement in any way. So that's certainly an early intervention offer that we're in the process of offering. We also run parenting programmes. We run various programmes working with families and educating them. So that's part of our early intervention offer as well, although those children will be open to social services, but quite often they might be open to the parent support team, so on voluntary engagement, where we're looking to make changes with families. I think, as you've seen within the report, we're not only going to have our one Cwmbran-based family centre, but we're also going to have one in the north of the borough in Cardiff as well, which is really exciting. And hopefully it means that we can broaden that offer out and that it's much more easily accessible to communities, both in the north and the south of the borough.
Thank you. We were, very pleased when we, I think, to hear about the centre opening in Cardiff. And I'm trying to organise a visit for us. We weren't sure about the name, though. It's the Corn Bin. Perhaps we're opening it.
That's the name of the building. We're actually calling it Stanley Road, which is in keeping with Wesley Street, which is the other family resource centre in the south. So, yeah, we don't like the name either.
I did comment, they put them in the bin.
Yes. And, well, Stanley Road, I've got no problem with that. It's a very good album.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Councillor Janet Jones, please.
Thank you. In relation to 4.44, the children looked after reduction strategy aligned with the Marmot principles and the deal mission. Is the federation between us and Blaenau Gwent having an impact? Have we shared practices, and do we have lessons learned, etc.?
Members will be aware in terms of, I guess, that federation between Torvine and Blaenau Gwent. While some other directorates have merged totally and have one strategic director sitting across both local authority areas, at the moment we've kept them separate from a Torvine and a Blaenau Gwent point of view, in acknowledgement, I think, of the risks that are associated with this line of work, and also because I think historically where we were in terms of our education provision as well, and that's obviously sitting in line with our directorate. We work closely, not only with Blaenau Gwent, but we work closely across Gwent. Jacqueline has monthly meetings with all the heads of children's services across Gwent. I meet with all the directors, it seems like on a daily basis across Gwent, but at least on a monthly basis. So we've got that collaboration and that join-up where we do share good practices and we share our pressures as well. There's a collaborative piece of work that we're doing, or there's a piece of work that we're doing with Blaenau Gwent that have a similar process in terms of an AIG process that I'm part of and assisting there to look at some of the pressures that they have. Because I think that there's almost, in terms of the journey, we're a couple of steps ahead in terms of the journey that Blaenau Gwent are going on. But but there are still lessons, and there are also lessons, for us to learn across both parts, across Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen. So that's always been the case. We've always worked collectively as heads of children's services.
Thanks, Jason. Because I want to know how the deal and its missions would impact on early intervention and prevention for preventing children coming into statutory service, but you more or less answered that.
I mean, in terms of the deal and its missions, the two missions that are dominant for us are Mission 1, which is around early years and giving every child the best start in life. So that's the crucial bit for us around prevention. This is where we are working really collaboratively and strongly across the federated model. So myself and Louise Monroe-Morris, who's my counterpart within Blaenau Gwent, we're working strongly with our provision within our early years provision and our colleagues within early years to look at where our gaps are and where we can work, I guess, in terms of, an economy of scale, in building up Deal 1 or Mission 1 within the deal on a collaborative basis, and the same applies within Mission 2 as well.
I'd just say in respect of lessons learned, and I know that the question was specifically in respect of our federation with Blaenau Gwent, but you will have heard in previous scrutiny about our service development manager and the fact that she's gone out to a number of different local authorities where we've seen good practice to try and learn from that practice and bring it back to Torfaen, and that's still active. We still do that. So quite recently she's been out to Swansea to look at their Baby and Me project, because we hear very positive feedback about their Baby and Me project. She's been out to observe that and learn lessons there, see how we could perhaps introduce it here. So, we are constantly looking at how other local authorities are managing things and where we can make improvements in line.
We've also been part of the Care Inspectorate Wales peer inspectors. Yep, can't remember what it's called. So we've got two managers in Torfaen who are signed up to that, one of who happens to be the service development manager, has had the opportunity to join another local authority inspector. So again, that opportunity is really invaluable for us in terms of understanding how other local authorities are operating and bringing back some of that good practice to Torfaen.
With one more question, and then we can let you go. Councillor Seaborn, please.
Nearly a record. There we go. Question 20 is around 6.2 in the report. The sustained reduction in the overall children looked after population, alongside a strengthened focus on reunification and rehabilitation and step down to a family-based care, has supported improved financial sustainability. How confident are we that we can continue to sustainably reduce the overall CLAB population and that these aren't short-term measures?
Based upon our longer-term planning, so our 3-year planning really, in light of the work I mentioned earlier that we've done through AIG, I'm confident that our trajectory will continue in terms of our reduction. I think we've done a lot of work in this last 12-18 months, as we know, in terms of our review of the structure, our review of practice. I think that's really, we're really seeing the benefits of that and how that's embedding within the service. We've got greater levels of accountability, and we've got greater levels of management oversight and control within the system. I think, as Claire alluded to earlier as well, this isn't just around management oversight as we are sitting around this table. This is around oversight at individual levels within the organisation as well. So that responsibility is placed upon team managers, upon individual social workers as well as upon ourselves to look at this strategically. So I'm confident we've got a good plan in place. And it's a realistic plan as well, based upon, like I said, the work we've done where we've analysed our performance and our data across other local authority areas as well. That's not to say that over this period of time there'll be peaks and troughs. As I said, you know, we had 296, or I think we went down to 294 a couple of weeks ago, 302 now. So we're always going to see those little peaks and troughs, really. It's important that we continue with our process and the way of working that we have, rather than thinking, oh, we've had a peak, you know, we need to change things, we need to really look and shake things again. We've been really effective over this last 2 to 4 years, and yeah, I'm confident that we can continue to reduce that. There'll come a point, of course, where children require to be looked after, unfortunately, and there will come a point where we will almost flatline or plateau off. And again, I think what I want to be in a position to be able to do then is really celebrate the success we've had to get to that point, rather than look at it and go, hang on, we've plateaued off here, what's going on here? We have that recognition that children will always, unfortunately, there'll be a requirement for children to be looked after.
Just in respect of our confidence, I think we said on a number of occasions that this isn't just about a programme, this is about a whole culture. And we've changed the culture within Torfaen in respect of how we manage our entry into care and our exits out of care. So I feel pretty confident that this will continue and that our children will have proportionate care orders and only have statutory intervention when it's required, because that's what we're striving to achieve, and I think that's what we'll be doing in the future.
Changing the culture has got to be the hardest thing, so congratulations to you. Okay, well, thank you very much for attending today and giving us your benefit of your expertise. Are there any sort of summary comments that you'd make to like to make?
If I could just add a quick one, which for us, even though we focused upon on numbers of children looked after, this isn't a numbers game. As Claire said earlier, you know, each number there is a child, and one of the things that we will always focus upon is safe decision making. You know, this isn't a focus upon keeping our numbers down because we have to save money or we want less children in our looked after system. This is a recognition that children within the looked after system don't always achieve the best outcomes as well. And as Jacqueline mentioned earlier, sometimes we make a decision around safeguarding in one domain and it leads to a risk in another. So this isn't just a numbers game, game. This is around safe decision making and a recognition that children don't always get the best, best outcomes when they're looked after.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. Not quite a record, but not too bad, eh?
We'll see how we go next month. Jacqueline's answered all the questions for next month.
Yes.
We could have had a double meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, can I please remind you that the meeting is still in formal proceedings and still being webcast. Can I refer you now to the scrutiny activity and invite you to offer your recommendations? If I go to the end of the report, our scrutiny activity is 1. To determine whether the actions set out within our Children Looked After strategy and priorities identified through the AIG process are delivering a reduction in Torfaen's children looked after population. So, we'll answer that one first. I think it has.
I think the strategy is, but like you said, there's always room for improvement, and we don't want to be challenging with things that are wrong. I think the strategy is very good. I think it's working. There's also there's always room for improvement. As you said, it fluctuates with the needs of families and children. But I was glad he said that we're focusing not on numbers, but on children. I thought that was, important. He mentioned that.
I think the eliminated gender will help.
Yes, yeah.
Be embedded, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you. Anyone else?
Agree.
Like I said earlier, I think it's really encouraging that, you know, if you can change a culture, I mean, that's half the battle, really. Well, three-quarters of the battle. And when you bear in mind, they've only had this new structure for less than a year, I think, isn't it? You know, I am confident that, you know, this new strategy will deliver. Okay, well, going back to our scrutiny activities, the second one is to assess whether the actions delivered through the strategy will continue to see further reductions in the children looked after population.
I've got an issue on... Sorry, Chair. Regarding the police and the training issues and how we have, as a council, have any control over what they do with their referrals or what have you. So it's about monitoring it, I suppose, and the recommendation is to monitor the police referral specs, I think, so, and training, whether you know, it's not for us to put the training on for the police force, it's for the police to recognise there's a training issue there for the frontline officers. So.
And we know that that's been an ongoing need. That's cropped up every time we've talked about this. That's cropped up. So while I think as an authority we've made some quite significant changes, that area doesn't seem to have changed at all, unfortunately. Yeah.
That might be a recommendation, and that we write to the whoever, Chief Constable or Police and Crime Commissioner, the appropriate person. Yeah.
Well, Jason,
sorry, go on.
Jason's message alluded to the fact that he's having a conversation with the Chief Inspector.
Yes.
I think if it comes from scrutiny as well, it'll be a two-pronged attack. And,
yeah, I think it gives him more strength to his arm.
I agree. Yeah. Well, he came on to ask a question about, I think it was Rose's question, about the referrals to the courts, and they were saying it's 10 to 12 weeks. But, you know, is there any way that that can be rallied up or, you know, put pressure on them to, because there seems an awful lot, you know, in that time, 10 to 12 weeks. Yes, there could be changes, but it's still very challenging, isn't it? Are we having too many cases, referrals going to the courts?
Well, I think I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty confident that all sort of discharges from care have to go to court. Yeah. I think there are general hold-ups in court. You know, I mean,
general across the board.
Yeah, across the board. I mean, you know,
it's out of our hands.
It's kind of out of our hands.
Just an observation.
Yeah. But it does affect our social workers because if they're tied up waiting for court to happen and preparing their caseload, sometimes they set back because the caseload is not complete. Yeah. You know, and it is our responsibility. But there's other issues in you know with dealing with how many magistrates there, how many court cases they're hearing, whether or not it needs to be sent back and brought back.
And it could be in court all week.
Yeah.
It also puts excess pressure on the existing social workers, isn't it? So, yeah.
I think those wait times are down significantly. If you remember, just after COVID, and you took a similar item, they are down significantly. And Claire was satisfied that those timeframes were appropriate. Yeah.
Sorry.
More foster carers. Continue with our efforts to recruit more foster carers, especially for children with complex needs and older children. Obviously, the complex needs then might reduce our numbers of children that we need to send into residential care. So I know we're doing it, but if we could keep up that effort and focus on children with complex needs.
I also like the fact that we're looking at good practice and best practice across local authorities and across Wales, and you know that they're bringing that back to our authority, like with the Baby and Me. So whether or not there's a recommendation, they continue to monitor the best practice.
Yeah, I agree.
Coming back to Jane's question about the children's voice, it would be interesting to see a reflection now that it's been taken over by youth services, you know, to see. So if we could do something like that.
Because we don't know when
they do it, it's, you know,
we don't know when that consultation is taking place. It's going to finish yet, but we can bear it in mind for the future.
Perhaps if I put that on the action sheets rather than they can come back and just tell you when that's been settled.
Yeah, thank you, members. Well, third scrutiny activity is to make recommendations to the executive member for areas of further development or focus. I think we've got a couple.
Can I
Any more? Yeah.
give congratulations on a concise report again? I think we had difficulty in the pre-agenda of actually looking for questions or comments. We managed to get a few, but yeah, I think our compliments to the team, because they are a team now and it's working really well, both in education and social services. I think the reports that they bring to us have certainly improved no end to what we used to see.
Communication with one another and how they're all, collectively responding to all the questions. It has definitely improved since I've been on these committees. So, yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Make a note of that. Yeah. Any other recommendations?
We picked up the one with the police and and the good practice. That's the only one. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I mean, this new strategy has only been in place less than 12 months. I think this is perhaps something we can revisit, maybe in 12 months' time. It'll have more chance to sort of embed itself, wouldn't it? So some of the questions about sustainability, would answer themselves, really.
Yeah, and when the eliminated gender is fully implemented.
Yes, that will be. Yeah. Okay, then. Well, we'll leave it there, I think. Agenda item 6, our consideration of item for next meeting. Rebecca, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. So this is where members can confirm which item you'd like to scrutinise at your next meeting. So you can see there from the appendices to the report, you have the basket of items that you selected at Visioning, and you'll see the schedule for the 30th of April meeting is the redesign of the children's services, which has been referenced on a couple of occasions at this morning's meeting. You then have the exec forward plan, where there are no listed upcoming decisions within the remit of this committee for this time period. And then there are 2 audit referrals that have come through there. So one on the adoption service, the regional adoption service, and then one which was a safeguarding review up in North Wales, and they have made a set of recommendations there. So members, it's up to you, over to you. Would you like to continue with that children's services redesign? And bear in mind that these audit recommendations, you will receive updates on those when you have your visioning session in the summer. So you will have updates on those recommendations and what actions are being taken to address them. And then at that point, you could decide to take those as items for next year. But obviously, it's open to you as a committee what you'd like to do.
With the safeguarding,
certainly.
Is that something that we should prioritise maybe to look at?
So the safeguarding one is a review that took place in North Wales. It's not specific to Torfaen, so it's not raised any specific issues with Torfaen. They've made a national set of recommendations. But again, that's up to you. And like I said, you will receive updates on what we do specifically. And when you receive your audit update report in July, at that point, you could then, if you're not satisfied with those updates, determine that you want to take that next year in your visioning baskets. But like I said, it's up to you.
That we need to be looking at.
I haven't had any concerns raised with. I did chat with both Jacqueline and Jason yesterday, and no concerns were raised with regards specifically to that they would like the committee to prioritise that. Okay.
The review actually is about, sorry, bear with me a minute. It was a child practice review of a gentleman who was a former head teacher at a school.
Oh, yeah.
No. Okay.
Yeah, no, okay.
Yeah, I just meant it in the loosest possible but, yeah, so I think we'll just stick with what's in our basket as it stands. Maybe come to the safeguarding issues maybe next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, well, that's everything. It's just my duty now to close the meeting. I want to thank you all for attending and for the in-depth question and contribution today. And the date of the next meeting is on the 30th of April.
Yep.
Okay.
This year's going, isn't it?
Yeah. So thank you. I now close the meeting.